83-year-old and Childfree. Welcome back, but if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I work in community aged care and over the years have met some incredible people. I just wanted to share a story from about 10 years ago before I realized I was child-free. I had a female client who was 83 years old. She lived alone, never married, and had no children. For her generation, this was unthinkable. When I'd speak to her about her life, she would say, "I was a teacher, I would be around children all day, why would I want to go home to them too? Having a husband would have been too restrictive. I wanted to travel and see the world." Spoiler, and she did. She had been told all the same things that we regularly get told, including that she would be old and lonely with nobody to care for her. Yet she had more of an active social life than I did or do. She wanted to learn how to use a computer, so she contacted a local school and arranged for 2 students to visit her each week to teach her. And when it came to having someone to care for her, well, she had me. She would tell me about her sister who had 5 kids and was completely alone with barely a phone call, let alone a visit. I still think of her a lot. She was so amazing and interesting. When I decided to be child-free, thinking of her made me realize that it would be a lot easier for me than it was for her. Thanks for reading. Just thought a positive story might make someone smile. She reminds me so much of my aunt, father's aunt to be precise. A kindergarten teacher, child-free, never married or got a partner. She was the chillest and sweetest person. We all loved her dearly. She loved painting, always had a smile on her face. She had a lot of money as she didn't have to spend them on any kids. She encouraged me to keep studying and to surround myself with respectful people. She was so proud when I started my PhD, which I completed recently. She died 2 years ago, not alone, but with her friends and loving family by her side. Congrats on your PhD! I'm also child-free, now almost 60, but didn't get married until almost 40. Husband has children from previous marriage that don't call him unless he calls them. I have several nieces and a nephew that I always encourage to go to school and to be the best they can be. But recently, it backfired on me and everyone is mad and complaining that I told them to go to school. But that was about 5 years ago, so there's a big family rift on that side, and they no longer speak to me, including my brother. I must say, I did enjoy them when they were growing up, but now I'm very disheartened by this whole thing, and I guess I'm glad I never had any kids. It's crazy. And I always said it so that they will explore options and have more of a fulfilled life and be the best they can be. But instead, none of them did anything with their lives and they feel I'm putting them down, which is quite the contrary. I never put anyone down and I always encourage them. But now, all of a sudden, I'm the outsider and the enemy in their eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. You only cared about someone and gave them advice. It was ultimately their and their family's choice to pursue whatever path they pursued. For example, doing a PhD can be quite draining mentally, and I've regretted doing it many times, but I've never blamed my aunt for insisting I keep studying. I was the one who applied for it. My aunt only wanted what was best for me, and I've always known that. People will always give you advice, but whether you follow it or not is your choice alone. Hence your responsibility. Hope your nephew and your family realize that too. It's crazy. I have 2 perspectives on this. First, I never had any aunts or uncles remotely interested in me at all, and I had plenty of them. I really wish I would have had that outside of my immediate family. That being said, my parents were supportive, college wasn't even a question, it was a fact, and both my parents were very open about no expectation of us having kids. Both grew up very poor, both wanted kids, but also regretted not getting more education and travel. So I would have died to have a special aunt. Second, now my husband and I are the child-free aunt and uncle. We have 13 nieces and nephews. We are very close to a few. We give them extra time, attention, advice, etc. As close as we are, my husband has to remind me at times, at the end of the day, we're only aunt and uncle. We can influence and love, but we will never be as important as their immediate family. They can't blame their failures on you, and they are being really unfair to you. My mom had already had 1 abortion and didn't want another. My mom found out she was pregnant with me at 3 months. She was bleeding each month and didn't think twice until 2 months in. And I was born 3 months early. My mom was not a good mother. At all. I've suffered so much from being an unwanted child. I ended up being child-free by accident. My husband doesn't have strong swimmers. At 43, I'm so grateful that I didn't have kids. I'm way more like my mother than I generally care to admit. And I also would have been a terrible mother. I was worried about what will happen to me later in life. My husband is quite a bit older than me, so it's realistic that I'll end up alone. This post makes me feel a little better. This post reminds me of the concept of epigenetics because she says that she's more like her mother than she cares to admit, which is so interesting because we can't really escape our parents in different ways. But epigenetics is where certain things that you wouldn't usually expect to be inheritable are actually inheritable, like concepts of fear or being afraid of something very specific or having a specific set of behaviors that is unique to the parent or your ancestors that you also do. And this is something that is fairly new, but they've already had studies that support this concept that we used to be taught is actually impossible. Like, you can't inherit certain behaviors, you can't inherit things that are not in your genetic code. But they found that certain things that affect how your genes are expressed or regulated are the things that may be in control of these epigenetic factors. There's also cultural backing for this concept. There's this movie called Teta Sustada, and that means milk of sorrow. The movie is about this young girl who inherits her mother's trauma and depression, and it's said that she got it through drinking her mother's milk as an infant, which also could have biological bases. It could be factual, but we don't really know how this happened. But essentially, her mother grew up in a time of war. It caused her a lot of trauma, and it affected her behavior, and it also affected the way that this daughter was raised, even though I'm pretty sure she didn't really see her mother that often in the movie. But it's very interesting to me that these recognized institutions also cross over with cultural beliefs. I'm in a similar situation. I grew up an only child to a horrible mother. Dad left, he's worthless. My mom was not the best mom. She was an alcoholic and literally said to my face that her needs come first. I chose not to have kids for a lot of reasons, but most of them being bad genes, no support, never met anyone worth bonding with, and just didn't want to get pregnant or deal with the lifelong and financial commitment of having a child. I'll never regret my decision, ever. I am human though, and have moments where I wonder what it would have been like. Then I wake up back to reality and I'm glad for my situation. I'll be alone too. I have a feeling there will be a lot of us childless folk when we get older, and that's okay. Let's plan on having kick-ass retirements and wheelchair races down the hallways of our communities. It'll be okay, one day at a time. As someone who is aromantic, the concept of being alone does not bother me at all. Like, it does not keep me up at night. I would actually prefer it. Being in a relationship sounds like stress, and also having kids sounds like extra stress. My mother is in her mid-70s now, and of the women she knows, almost all of them are either estranged from their kids, have actively crappy relationships with their kids, and for a few of them, their kids are literally destroying their mom's lives, taking all their money, treating them like absolute crap, etc. It might just be me, but damn near every life story of the people I know who have gotten married and had kids has ended in divorce. Crappy kids, other disasters. I don't hear about too many happy endings. But again, that's just my experience. It's not just you. My mother is also in her 70s and it's the same. They blame their adult children, not X, Y, and Z, furious that their children had minds of their own and couldn't be controlled, and only speak highly of them if they have a prestigious career or got a grandson out of it. Her few friends who didn't have kids who are in the same age group or older still have really interesting hobbies and lives and keep their minds active. And yet somehow she spins it as how sad for them, or says they're too old to do something, but I find them inspiring. I can relate. My first jobs in healthcare were in home health and assisted living or nursing homes. Those elderly women made quite the impression on my young mind. I was already indifferent to having children, really didn't care either way. So many of those women expressed regret about being just a mom. Here they were at the end of their lives, totally unfulfilled, regretting not becoming a nurse, teacher, etc. But many expressed hope because newer generations had so many more options that they hoped we would not squander. All that nonsense about who will take care of you when you're older, those women are screaming from their graves, not your children. Adult children will be busy with lives of their own. Most elderly parents were lucky to just get a phone call. Visits were too rare and too short to fill the void of what they were missing. Guess who didn't miss a phone call or visit because they had no such expectation? The child-free elderly. They already figured out how to have meaning and joy in life just by themselves. Just imagine marrying young, having kids, spending most of your adult life depending on kids or grandkids for your joy and happiness, when all of a sudden you find yourself at home or in long-term care all alone. Now imagine spending your adult life with no kids, living by yourself or just a spouse, able to find meaning, joy, self-fulfillment in everyday life from within. Then one day you move to long-term care and wonder where all the peace and quiet went. All those noisy neighbors who are literally next door. I learned so much from the elderly at a young age and could not be more grateful for that insight. It was eye-opening and not what society wants you to believe.